So, anyway, so with that, I just would like to talk about and go to a different part of the world. A world that I operated in also. I've been in the West Pacific, Philippines, everywhere, but all over the globe. But this is an area that I operated in, and also when I was in the White House working for President Clinton, that I was the one who coordinated the nation, his administration's national security strategy for a few years. I think it was about three and a half or so, whatever it was. And brought together all the elements of our power. The power of our military, yes, but understanding the limitations upon it. The power of our economy, the power of our diplomacy, and the power of our ideals, and bringing them together to best advance our nation. As I talk about what's going on with Iran today, I would like to speak about it from four important principles. The first one is that America's greatest power is its power to convene, to bring together nations and peoples of the world for a common cause that serves us all. The second one, as I talk, is militaries can stop a problem, but militaries can never fix a problem. So even after World War II, when we stopped Germany, it was the Marshall Plan of economic assistance that actually came in and fixed fascism. And so when I arrived in the Arabian Sea with my carrier battle group to begin the strikes against Afghanistan, waiting there was an international armada to become part of our American carrier battle group. Japan was there. It had been outside the sea of Japan since the Second World War, and Germany was alongside them. We had convened the world for a common cause. The third principle is, if you're a commander-in-chief or president, and you are going to use our military or be presented with the decision of whether to, you better know the world and understand our power so that you actually will know how it will end before deciding if it is wise to begin. So when I joined up with these 20 ships or so from the International Armada, where the Italian Minister of Defense had actually said in a message that the Italians are coming, he said, some may look at us as better lovers than warriors, but America has been attacked and we will be there with them. But when I was ordered to take my aircraft carrier battle group out of the Arabian Sea and into the Persian Gulf, where we had been striking against Afghanistan to begin the precursor strikes against Iraq, only the Australians and British went with us. Because those, as we left behind and stayed behind, they knew that our leadership could not explain how Iraq would end before we began. And then the last of the four principles that I think a commander-in-chief or president of our nation must have from the depth and breadth of experience in this world, not just on ships, but by backpacking there and backpacking through communist Europe, all of it. I think, that at the same period of time, the early 80s, but really getting to know the people. What's a Shia? What's a Sunni? How do they differ? Because we unleashed them against each other in that tragic misadventure of Iraq. The last one is, one best understand how to bring together all the elements of our power. Those four I mentioned: the power of our economy, the power of our diplomacy, the power of our ideals, and the power of our military and limitations upon it. Because we are on the cusp of forgetting that. Actually, we have. And we are about near striking Iran. So today, with those four principles to guide us, I'd like to walk through a little bit about what's with Iran today. And I mean the situation, not just the country itself. So the very first one is our ability to convene the world. We did that beginning about 2 administrations ago, and then 3 administrations ago, and then the administration for this one concluded it with a very fine art of diplomacy. We convened the world to disarm the nuclear weapons making capability of Iran. But we didn't do it with our military. We disarmed it with our diplomacy by convening the world to place economic sanctions upon them, including Russia and China, India, and nations, led by countries of the European Union, supported by Japan and others, but also bringing those who are not often fellow travelers of ours, and we convened them. One example to illustrate what I mean, that diplomacy is not just speaking. It's understanding all the elements of our power. To give one example, how did we get Russia to actually place sanctions, to actually support sanctions against Iran that it was selling nuclear material to? Reactors, building them. Well, someone understood that as we were building in Europe a missile defense system, if you remember in Eastern Europe, in Czechoslovakia, others, we were putting in a missile defense system to protect America because we knew Iran was building these missiles, just like we knew North Korea was building them. And we wanted to protect America with missiles that could shoot, but they needed radars and other things out here to see them going up so we could shoot them as they're coming down before they hit us. Oh, by the way, it could also protect Europe. So your Soviet Union, now Russia, didn't like that. It was a stick in the eye of the bear, you might say. What do you mean? You're just protecting Europe and America against our missiles. That doesn't have, because remember, we were putting them in Eastern Europe. It used to be the Warsaw Pact belonging to the Soviet Union, i.e. Russia. And all of a sudden they were joining NATO. Now we're putting missiles defenses there. You can put yourself in their position and say, ooh, what's going on here? So what the administration wisely did in the negotiations to get them to do sanctions and stop giving them nuclear material was say, okay, I got it. I understand you don't like that. We are going to actually remove that missile system. We're not even going to put it in. But then this is what we did. They were happy. It wasn't released really all to the public, but they pivoted and put sanctions on Iran, kind of a quid pro quo. What we did for a lot less money is we upgraded the software on our Aegis naval cruisers that can actually shoot an early intercept starting about this year, which is when the system was going to come into, the one there was going to come in on land and the one here, so that we have the same capability. Actually, it's better. It's mobile. A new threat moves over North Korea. We have ships there. We move here. And it not only protects Europe, but the other one did not protect Israel. And so that's what diplomacy is. It understands all the elements of our power. How do you compel someone to convene with us? What's in their interest? How do you bring them to the table, get what we need to protect America and Israel, which we had, and get a better deal, and have them? Imagine if we had someone do that with the Republicans and Democrats. But that's the issue of in our how do you convene the world? And that's how the world's greatest generation did it when they came home from the second of two world wars instead of 26 years, said it's not going to happen again. We're going to win the next world war without a shot, and they did, the Cold War, by convening 67 countries in collective security arrangements, say, it's not your day, Soviet Union. And then we built the World Trade Organization. We built the WHO. We built the UN. We built the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, which we didn't have when fascism arose in the Great Depression, to make sure we could keep them from going under into fascism. That's how you convene the world with a purpose, but you have to understand all the elements of our power to bring it together. And because of that, we, in the leadership of the liberal world order, based upon individual and human rights, open and fair markets, fair and just governments that embrace the collective good, brought extreme poverty from 88% of the world in 1945 to 8% today. Doubled the illiteracy rate. It didn't just happen. It was our leadership of the world that expanded our American dream, and John F. Kennedy and Ronald Reagan understood that it was this global concord that gave us better peace and prosperity and the collective good of the world. Second, military. So we convene the world, and what are we doing today? We're out there by ourselves. As a matter of fact, Britain yesterday said, my oilers are kind of getting taken apart here by Iran. What did she do? Did she join with us? No. She said, I'm going to put together a European Union force that's going to protect it. What do you mean? That's our strongest ally. Why is there this fracture here? I mean, even because they don't agree. Much like those ships didn't agree when they didn't come with us to the Persian Gulf, those countries, for the strikes against Iraq. I mean, this is a serious issue. We are kicking bruised allies telling them all, we're going home behind a wall thinking we're going to become great again, when we were great out there, because we protected us here, and we tell them it's a wrap. So where do they turn to? Number two, militaries can stop a problem, they never fix a problem. Iran was on the cusp of having a nuclear weapons capability device of 1 to 3 months. Most experts say it was 1 month or 2 months to have several nuclear devices that then could be mated to a missile, and they have missiles. It's another technology, you got to work through it, but that's where they were when finally the economic sanctions, under strong, cohesive leadership by our nation with others, because you can't close off sanctions without others, it's got to be 100%, was able to say, we're going to ship all that out. And what they shipped out was centrifuges. You got to spin that uranium up to make it bomb-grade material. It takes a long time to get to 20%, but after 20%, it can go to 90% to be bomb-grade material like that. She's down, we said, no bigger than about 3.67. And your centrifuges, 80% of them out of the country. The rest in storage, and if anybody understands anything about nuclear centrifuges, United Nuclear Aircraft Carrier Battle Group, they decay when they're in storage. And then we had eyes on everything. We spent 3,000 days in that country since 2015 inspecting it with tamper-proof seals, surveillance teams to make sure they kept their word, which they did. It was the most intrusive inspection regime ever in arms control. We didn't get that with the Soviet Union when Ronald Reagan took things down, or Nixon or whoever. This was really something. It would take them at least a year to get back to where they were. If they could do it very readily, probably take longer to get to where they were once we did that. But if it hadn't been and we would have had to strike, this is what would have occurred. If you operated in this area, there's only 2 places you can take your aircraft carrier. Only 2. Because you got to go 30 knots this way to launch your planes, you spin on back, and you launch them again. And recover them, you come on back, and you go always into the wind. Because you go so fast, you got to go deep. And there's only 2 places in the Persian Gulf where we operate to do that. They have 19 mini submarines. We can't find them because there's lots of metal on the Persian Gulf bottom, number one. Second, our sonar doesn't work there. It's so shallow, it reverberates. Plus, we're sitting ducks right there because they know we're just going to go back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. And they got hundreds of missiles here that are within 5 to 10 miles of you. And that's how close we operate to Iran. It's very scary at times. They'll send small boats out, those Iranian Revolutionary Guards, and I would have helicopters up because they were the best combat air patrol. And they'd watch them, they'd come down lower, they'd take their air blades to blow them away. If they would, steer them off, warning, warning, ready to shoot, and then they turn away at the last moment. I mean, you're asking young men and women, you're out there and there's nobody above you, say, Mother, may I? But the Iranian military themselves, the professionals, they'll call you up on the phone and say, coming down your starboard side, 300 years. Roger that. Extraordinarily professional. But the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, which is the ones making the mischief, is the ones that could help this with our irrational actions right now, have this spin up. I proposed when I was the Navy Admiral a red hotline, just like we had with the Soviet Union. Because they're coming towards the aircraft carrier and they're not turning, can I just pick up a phone like we did with the Soviet Union and have a red hotline to go back and forth? Because you don't want to have an inadvertent mistake made because someone's having a bad day in that vessel coming towards you. But so since we can't survive there, we'll get the heck out of Dodge and we'll come down here. And probably our aircraft carrier is going to have to do most of the strikes because these airfields, they don't like Iran, but you know what? They've got hundreds of missiles that can rain down on our bases in Bahrain, the UAE, Qatar, and other places, as well as Israel. So hopefully we'd be able to, if we had to do the strike, be able to use our air bases, but don't count on it. Like we couldn't count on Saudi Arabia using the last Gulf War. The first one, yes, not the second. So we'll be out here safely to some degree, and then we'll start striking. And we got to keep in mind that this Iran is not Iraq. It's 4 times larger. Sophisticated missile systems. They got them from Russia, some of them. This is a tough deal. Offensive types of forces that they can strike with missiles. Iran couldn't. I mean, it was like a cakewalk. This is no cakewalk. And as we strike, we're going to have to hit these, go through the air defense systems. We got to destroy them so we're safe. And we can get some over there, but we got to make sure they don't linger. But those hundreds of missiles, we better destroy those as quickly as possible, because as soon as we strike, you think she's just going to sit there? If we're really doing a big strike. I don't mean 1 or 2 are pickling off a tomahawk or something. And I'm talking a sustained strike to destroy this nuclear weapons capability. So how many rain down in Israel and the other places? What do those other countries do when they start striking? What's going on here? And as we continue our strikes, it'll take about, depending upon if any air forces help us, and some will come long range, but it will matter if others help us, because these facilities range from Tehran to Esfahan to Iraq, and they also go deep in buried targets over here in Fordo, which is one of its newest ones and is buried under about 300 feet of rock. We just don't, unless something has changed in the last years, have a blockbuster bomb to do that. And so at the end of the day, about a month or 2, depending upon if the Air Force helps us, we can say we've destroyed or hurt a lot of it. But in 4 years, they can rebuild it. In other words, militaries can stop a problem, but they won't fix a problem. So now you've fractured relationships with your allies with a strike of such sustainability. It can be rebuilt. The economic situation is in peril because they'll close this with thousands of mines that we watch them practice and do with fishing boats. And if you want to clear those mines, it will take months to clear those mines if they don't sink ships in it. And so, and you're going to have to do it with the belligerent Iran there. Well, how do you do that? And so this is fraught with the second lesson. It's military stop problem, but they can't fix it. And second, you better know how it's going to end before you begin. Everyone wants to talk tough. But being tough is really understanding the consequences of a decision, like those Democrats and Republicans didn't understand when they voted for that tragic misadventure in Iraq. And finally, one best understand, as I said at the beginning, of those first 3 lessons, we convene the world for a greater good, for peace and prosperity. That's our strength. Military if you must, but then you better understand it won't fix the problem. And so you better know how it ends. Because we could stop it, but we can't fix it. And how will it end, and how will we make sure it's fixed? So when I was on the ground for a very brief period at the beginning of the Afghanistan war, because I had to form the Navy's Strategic Anti-Terrorism Unit and had to go in there because it was a really different war. I mean, my classmate from the Naval Academy who was the head SEAL was riding a horse. When I gathered with SEALs and broke down farmhouses trying to assess new rules of engagement for the sophisticated high air power over here, we had to figure this whole thing out. But when I came out later, I would say, if we fix the illiteracy rate of women in Afghanistan, which was 98% when I was there, we do more to fix the global war of terror than our military today, after 19 years of war, is still courageously trying to stop. That's why I did First Global, to bring all those nations together, and asked at the Peace Institute to have an all-girls Muslim team from Afghanistan lead the parade. And I told them, that's why I want you there, to lead it, to show. That's how you can best convene the world to fix our problems. So someone in the presidency, which we have had absent for far too long, truly needs to understand this world. As those from China know, with the wonderful Belt and Road Initiative, for example. They now, because of the loans to the country, just opened up its second overseas naval base in Cambodia. The first is in Djibouti, because the debt that's attendant to taking a loan is 85% of Djibouti's government budget, and it's under. And so you really can demand certain outcomes of that. And that's why, which I won't go into now, the 5G network is so daunting if you really understand it, and probably the greatest of the challenges to America today, except for climate change, of how we have to convene the world if we want to protect America from the dangers of climate change, because 85% of it is done overseas, and they aren't meeting their commitment just like we are. But in Iran, we should go back into this accord, and we should have relationships with Iran, because she has common challenges that align with ours. Al-Qaeda, Sunni, they're Shia. They need to cooperate with them now, which they didn't used to because they help them make mischief against us. But they don't want them there long term in Afghanistan. They want stability. And you could probably engage with them like we did with the Soviet Russia to say, how can we work it here, not with missile systems to get them out of Eastern Europe, but still do our things to resolve it. I went on a bit. But I think these issues, I understand why they stay up on the stage. Are you for Medicare for all? But just raise your hand, okay? I got that. But that is not doing service to how you're going to do it. And do you really understand it? And part of the reason I'm running, besides returning accountability to this nation, is the challenges for America, where it's one world now, to where the dangers from climate change, no matter what we do at home, will explode on us because we can only do 15%. To where China is, understandably, expanding a new world order because of what they believe they can do for their own Chinese dream. But yet it's at conflict at times, as you can see with ours, and how do we work with that? Because it can contract our way of life. And third is, and I backpacked through China, I have such admiration for it. But we have to understand, and I could tell you a story going down that sheep boat that really understands why we talk past each other. But I'll save that for the end or whatever. But the third one is, even our corporations are outsourcing our national security. Because if you have an Android phone right with you now, everything you say, programmed with Chinese software, is going back. Everybody knows that, or should. But that's why motherboards in Aegis ships and in CIA drones were embedded with the motherboards and the servers in Apple and Amazon with microchips. Our supply chains we've outsourced. And so we need to come to grips with these challenges of ours, working with others, because I do believe that it isn't a conflict, it's a challenge of how you work it and stymie things that other countries are doing that may not be in our interest. Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Hi, Alan Coslow. I'm running for office here in Iowa, and I've been a delegate to the National Convention twice, and I'm a Jewish American. And this past Thursday night, 2 days ago, we had one of Netanyahu's senior advisors, Jonathan Schachter. I don't know if you ever worked with him, because he was actually a military liaison for Netanyahu. He gave a summary of what's happening in the Middle East. And what he said about Iran, there's one specific area I want to talk to you about. He said that a nuclear device has three part components. One is the fissionable material, the uranium. One is the actual part that causes the explosion and makes it a bomb. And the third is the missile. The missiles are taken care of by UN, multiple UN resolutions. The fissionable material was taken care of by the agreement. But he says the biggest problem is the part that actually makes the thing go boom. And he says, in the last inspection report, there was 45 pages, there was half a page on the part that makes it go boom. And that they have proof, Israel has proof, that they have actually perfected that to almost to the point equivalent to what the U.S. has for making it go boom. Yeah. You said you would go back into the Iran agreement, and there's two aspects. There's the sunset component of it comes up very quickly, and also there's not really anything in it about the part that makes it go boom. What's your thoughts on it?
If I understand what you mean by the part that goes boom, you build a uranium bomb, but it has another nuclear device within it that explodes, so this explodes. You're talking about this part down here.
Just having the uranium.
Right, no, sir.
Yeah.
You have that. You're talking about the other nuclear device that is in there to make the big device go boom.
Correct.
Okay, yeah. I'd like to see the evidence. Why hasn't it been presented to the United Nations, the IAEA? If it really, they know, and they have broken the agreement, and we've been down there looking at everything.
But that component isn't part of the agreement.
But we would even look for everything. We don't just go in there and we happen to see over there that they've got chemical weapons, and we ignore it, all right? So I need to know exactly what this is, all right? But why don't they make this public? Because this is the first I've heard of it, all right? So in other words, I'm a Ronald Reagan fan, trust but verify, all right? Let me see it, all right? And then, if it isn't in the accord, okay, it's not in the accord, all right? Is that beautiful? No. But would I have still done what they did, that they still could not, even having this device, be able to rebuild a nuclear device, do an actual nuclear device for at least a year? And the answer is, that's still true. So we got it out for a year, and I don't know if what they're saying, I hate to say this, is so. I mean, we've had governments recently, including ours, that haven't exactly put out the truth, all right? But I'd like to see it. But I'd also know that even with that, they would not have gotten us. We can still take some year to get out. Why would we not have done it then?
By the way, thank you, Admiral, and I want to thank you for your service.
Yeah, thank you. But I hope my answer is,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, and I'll send a copy of this clip to.
I mean, because remember, a lot of those people raised Medicare. I'm for Medicare for all, and afterwards they say, "Well, I didn't really mean that. I couldn't hear." So you know what I'm saying, all right? All right. Yes.
I missed the connection to the 5G network. Could you explain that a little?
Yeah, I kind of went off track. The 5G network, you know, we have 4Gs everywhere now, 3Gs, 4Gs, depending upon how much you want to pay. The 5G network is going to revolutionize economies and warfare. I mean, whoever builds it will own the 5G network. And by that I mean the following. There's a piece of gear in it that goes into the wireless towers that America does not make ever since we sold Lucent to the French, I think it was, who've now sold it to Sweden, I think. Now, Apple can say they got a 5G network going on. They don't have a real 5G network. They bought parts from elsewhere to build it. But Huawei, did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes.
Thank you. We're all familiar with Huawei, aren't we? So hot button issue is they are basically building the belt. When you sign up for the Belt and Road Initiative, which 70 countries and international organizations have, and please correct me on anything I say if you'd like to, they also have to sign up for what's called the digital road. So these countries inked in said, you can build my 5G network. The thing is, when you build it, this piece of gear means you no longer have to hack for information. As you know now, we lose $300 billion a year because of China hacking our systems, according to the National Security Agency and others who've said it's the greatest crime. So this piece of gear here, when you sign up for it, you know, you're on the 5G network, so right now if I want to do a virtual business meeting, it's not going to be confidential. Everything, it's eyes on. You don't have to hack, everything goes through this piece of gear and is seen eyes on. It also, so if you have artificial intelligence that's going through it, you can just download it, take it over here, and break it down and see how they built it, whoever did it. If you want to go the opposite way and then take down, like we have 120,000 water dams and water systems in America, and you want to take them down, then it's very easy to come in this way and just close it, critical infrastructure on it. So I call it in my thing is probably, in our relationship with China, the greatest danger of all. Because when I was a Navy admiral, and I ran the Navy's $350 billion warfare program, set aside how many ships, how many that, I said the Navy doesn't need 375 ships. We need about 260. We don't need 54 submarines, we need about 35. I got in a lot of trouble for it, but I got it briefed in Congress. Why? Because I wanted to move into cyberspace. I wanted to move into exactly what this world is. So today, a gentleman who worked for me, an officer who commands the Pacific, has said, China now commands the Western Pacific. First loss of command and control. And he said we need more cyberspace. It's the new domain of warfare and the economy. I mean, I had to wait for a wire to come back here to hook up till I could live stream this thing, you know? And so that 5G, whoever builds it owns it for intelligence purposes, commercial purposes, because every piece of data goes through you. So today, what's being put into motherboards that go into our servers are these, like the old day, the sleeper agents, Soviet Union sleeper agents. Remember, as we were growing up, we heard about them. They'd wake up on the day of the war. They were our next door neighbor, and they'd do some damage. Well, now they just have to push a button, and that bug in the system takes down the computer system of the server of Apple or the Aegis ship. It's totally different, less expensive. And I thought the military was wasting its money. It needed and not having it less effective. You know, but I ran up against the buzzsaw of the congressional military industrial complex and paid some cost for that. But we don't have as good a military. But this 5G network, the president is wrong, he's right on the issue of Huawei. He's wrong in how he's going about it. What you need to do is convene the World Trade Organization, which is broken, fix it, so that we can say, this is the definition of an arm of the Chinese or any other government. This is the definition of illegal subsidies that you're paying for the land and everything else of a company. And we lower the standard of accountability, of evidence, because the government China is quite opaque, and you can't find this information out. And so that's why, you know, you have to do these things. And then you convene the world like we had for Iran and say, come on, China, we got to work together on this baby here, you know? And if you can't, here's what we do. And that's why I think our government, just like it did for the roads under Eisenhower, has to invest in making the 5G network with companies. So I put a tweet out the other day, because I know you all stayed up at night to see it, on the street. I mean, these are issues that, I mean, you know, who knows cyber warfare? And it doesn't exactly wake everybody up on the Democratic debate stage. But sometimes, as John F. Kennedy said, you got to tell people what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. And in my mind is well, anyway, you get the point. This is a real challenge for us. All right? Yes?
For my electrical...
Okay, can I interrupt for a minute? I know what I said. So that's why I put out on the tweet, no, we should say this. First of all, they shouldn't have been permitted. Our antitrust laws are broken for monopolies in agriculture here in Iowa, and they're broken because they don't know what to do when these telecoms come together. And we should have said no, or if we said yes, demanded that they invest in the components of the 5G network. And it's just like the new interstate highway system. It's just different, but it's also lightning speed, and it's going to mean warfare is different and economies.
If my electrical engineer and circuit design specialist...
Uh-oh. Was I okay in what I said?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to offer a little clarification for everyone else. One of the major issues that I've seen in the last 5 years even is America is losing control of our circuit fabrication supply lines. Intel still has domestic fabrication, Micron does, IBM has just divested Global Foundries, and I see it as an impending national security disaster that we no longer can manufacture our circuits for our mission critical devices at home. And I would love to know if you have a plan to
Yes.
bring the global community together to...
Thank you. I mentioned 3 major issues with regard to our wonderful relationship that we need to be wonderful with China. And if you go on my website, in my announcement video, which is only 3 days and 2 minutes long, I broke it up into a short announcement video for me, 18 minutes, and 13 minutes, and then Who's Joe, 2.5 minutes. restoring U.S. leadership, and in there you'll see I address that's the second one under the Belt and Road Initiative. Then I go to the digital road, but I also include within that, as I tell everybody, we have outsourced our national security to China. 80% now of all mobile phones are made there. 2 weeks ago, once Apple just said we're going to ship our Mac Pros and make them there. They closed down the plant now this month, I think, and they're shipping it out. We will now have over 90% of our computers are there. And the issue is our technical supply chains are now a virtual monopoly within China. But the issue with that is we have seen, as I said, software in the Android phones programmed to send information surreptitiously back. And we have Bloomberg, it's still contentious, has said motherboards have come because they make it all. And what I said is our international companies like Apple are now just not outsourcing jobs because then they sent Mac Pro there. They are outsourcing international security. So I have raised it, well, others are just beating them up on jobs. Yeah, I get that. But it's also national security, and then I say, then they lobby they should not be lobbying our government for Chinese business. And so my take is that, I don't mean that in a pejorative way about it, I just mean, wait a minute, they're coming in here loaded with this stuff. Right. So that's the danger of it. So what we need to do, as I call it, we got to restructure the corporate commons. It can't just be one international company that happens to be U.S. recognized. We've got this same thing happening with all the European companies and others. So that's why you have to convene the world, and we are losing. There are certain technical standard organizations that set up what technical standards are, correct? Like for the 5G network, what the standards will be. China is now leading that. We are not, because we don't even make the part. Whoever leads those standards sets the standards for their country to make stuff. All right? And we have walked away from those. I mean, and second is what we have to say is, okay, you want to make it there? That's freedom of choice. But everything comes in is going to be thoroughly inspected, every single one, for our security. Now, that might mean you want to restructure your money-making outfit, and that means then they'd finally come here to where it's safe and all that. All right? Yes. I hope I'm in, but you know, that is a hard nut to have to break, but we have to do it. Right. We don't have control of our national security any longer.
Well, right, and in my mind, that comes down to fabrication capabilities.
Absolutely.
The modern process for a lot of chip manufacturers is to design a microprocessor comes in a base layer of silicon,
yep,
and then about 35 layers
right,
of metal. And you can obfuscate the design and operation
yep,
of the metal layers by having all kinds of interconnects,
yep,
that are mazed to deconstruct, and you can outsource the fabrication of those,
yep,
layers.
Yep.
But if you can't manufacture the top level technology on the base silicon layer, and you don't have source duplication, a lot of companies currently only have one fabrication, yep, facility.
Yep.
And that seems, yep, like a major.
And in all those things here, you can slip a bug in very easily.
Exactly.
And that's why it took us so long to discover it. Yes, sir.
Trump has said that Saudi Arabia is such a good customer for our weapons, and that they're buying a whole ton of guided munitions recently. And I was just wondering, Saudi Arabia doesn't have any amphibious component to invade Iran, do they? Or
any amphibious?
Or anywhere?
They have any what?
Saudi Arabia, yeah, wouldn't invade Iran, would they?
No.
Or why would they need those guided missiles,
yeah,
just to take care of Yemen and that,
yes,
kind of thing?
So two quick parts to this answer from my viewpoint. First off, we should shut down our weapons sales immediately to Saudi Arabia for the indiscriminate bombing that they are doing in Yemen, but also because they actually can have a crown prince who feels empowered to murder an American resident in his embassy because he has no concern about consequences from a rules-based world order that we used to lead. It was a rules-based, and if someone had done that, there would be consequences by the rules, and we just say, I don't believe that. So that alone is enough, and then the aim and discrimination. Second, we have to understand that they are on track to build 10 nuclear reactors in the next 10 years, 15 years. Are we selling it to them? Are Russia selling to them? How do we make sure they don't become the next? As this is part of the reason you wanted Iran to sign this deal, sir, is to get rid of their nuclear thing, because Saudi Arabia is their number 2 target after Israel, and we're third. And so they're going to get that. So why do they want weapons? They want weapons because they do want to do some judicious singular things with it, but like some other countries, it's almost more of a show of power. My example of this is, I've operated with the Saudi Navy. I've been there into the country several times. And we got underway, and most of their work, their Navy, is not, the officers are Saudi, but all the enlisted are from other countries. We give them a lot of money, a lot of arms, but they're not well trained on it. If you remember, trained on it. That's why you see such indiscriminate bombing in Yemen. I don't think it's purposeful. They're just not that proficient. So we give them all this, but if, for example, it's like Iraq, if someone of any ilk walked in, but it's a show and it might be sufficient to do what they want, like in Yemen. And so that's the main purpose, I would gather. You shouldn't sell somebody a fish. You should teach them how to fish. If you want to give somebody arms and you think it's right, and it's an arms deal with Saudi Arabia. Now, do I think that if they were moving towards human rights and other things like this way, we should abide some of their fears? Yeah, I do. But I think we have gone so far overboard on that. It's ridiculous. Yes, sir.
Congressman, thank you very much for coming back to Iowa again. And we feel Iowa is very fortunate to have a great opportunity to meet the national leaders. And I consider Iowa as a presidential university, so the students have all the access to the presidential candidates. You have excellent education for U.S. Navy Academy and Harvard University, and you have best prepared for your education and career. I want to talk about how the students in high school, college, best prepare for their education and career.
How students here in America best prepare? I think that what we need to do to get it better is we do need to start with a woman when she's pregnant, and those first 1,000 days, till they're about 2 years old, from the time they're pregnant, is probably the most important, almost time for learning for great nutrition. And we're failing in that significantly in many parts of our inner city. If you can truly get good nutrition in that period of time, and then what you need is you need to enhance and make sure everyone attends Early Start and Head Start. And then you need to fund fully for those below 75% of state median level of income the early education. And then what you need to do is to, I think, properly do the core curriculum. And I know for a couple years ago both sides didn't like it. That's probably exactly where I should be. But if done well over 2 years period of time to institute it, where you're not teaching to the test, like was the bad part about No Child Left Behind, but you've got certain principles that have to be done, that, and the districts institute them. I think we can correct a lot. But here's where the change needs to be. We worry about college loans, and yet our government is making $127 billion this decade off of student loans because it has the wrong interest rate, the 10-year Treasury bond. So the Congressional Research Service comes out and says, that's what the profit we're going to make. Second, as I met those at our event last night up in, where were we last night? Benton County. And I met the two women who had come from community college and Iowa State. One of them had transferred colleges. 40% of our students transfer colleges. Only 50% of their courses are ever accepted by another college. It's a business, and it shouldn't be. We need to make sure that we have a national credit system, but here's where the real focus needs to be, to your point, almost. Not the engineering aspect, but parts of it. I grew up in the Navy with those who used their hands and their minds. My first job was I had the plumbers on the ship. I had the welders. I had the electricians. That's my home, you know? But think about this. Our government, you know, we are worried about the students for training for a lifetime with loans for community college, and loans for college, and then loans for graduate school, and a loan for a doctorate as they keep going. But what about the guy or gal that get kicked out of a coal mine because climate change is coming? What about the farmer here that has 10 people driving the tractors, but now in the next decade they're all going to be wireless except for one to run the wireless? What happens to the other 9? We spend less on the labor force, the Trump and Clinton supporters, than any developed nation. We spend 0.001% of our gross domestic product. So when you lose a job, you're out of Schlitz. Who's going to pay for the next step of training? We need training for a lifetime. It's what other nations do. So in the military, it's what we do. You come on in, but you cook, by the time you do learn, after 20 years, you're a 4-star cook, literally. To re-enlist. But if you lose your job because the F-15 goes away, we send you to the largest community college in the nation, the Air Force Community College, literally. And you learn for 6 months a new skill in the F-22 and you're off. We need that commitment, sir, here in America, so that if we do rejoin up, as I think we do, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and there's some perturbations like NAFTA does, all those who lost their jobs, there's training for the next one. So the coal miner is trained how to go into solar power panels manufacturing. And it's a public-private venture. I've set aside $200 billion to begin that infrastructure. There's models for it in my book, which I wrote in 2015, and it sold 6 copies, if anybody wants one here. You know, it wasn't one of those, as I grew up in a log cabin ready to be president. It's actually fact-based. But it's in there, and I also talked about it on my website. That's the great compact, because you can't stop the world from changing technology, and the military recognizes that. And you're trained and retrained for a lifetime, because that's the real engine of us. You know, and that's what I wish people would start talking about. Remember, many of them, for their own political purpose, went Trump. I mean, what are you doing for them in their education and training?
Okay, I was going to hold this until afterwards, but this is the perfect time. About 1964, I had the pleasure of introducing Hiram Rockover, the Speaker of the Bureau of Iowa State. His presentation that day was about, at the time, the unions were extremely powerful, working for a 4-day week, and they almost died. His proposal was that we would have a 4-day week, and on the 5th day, the workers would go to school. Sounded like a good idea. The thing was the employers were going to pay for it. And that thing died on vine, and he was pushing it. That was about the ratio the military was being trained. 4 days working, the 5th day being trained. That pretty much buys into what you just said. And that's been laying on the table now for going on 50 years. Someone wrote an article on me the other day that I talked about the Navy because I referred to the lessons learned from it. When we're done here today, we purposely don't have anything scheduled because we're going into our own training, which is a strategy session. You know, we're going to sit there, what have we learned, where's the next step? You know, we've accomplished what we want, we're now 10th in the polls, tied. Yeah, I know it's only one, but still beats people who have been here with $11 million for a long time, you know? And okay, we have a plan, but if you don't have a plan, you're going to fail, but if you follow your plan, you're going to fail. But that is training. But that's what we do in the military, is after everything we train, it's required. You have training curriculums. What were the lessons learned? And I say this because I tell people, in the military, we have our challenges. Women get equal pay from day one. You can't rise when I was leaving to be an officer unless you had a master's degree above a certain level. Enlisted, when I was leaving the Navy, you had to have, as a senior chief petty officer, at least an associate's college degree. Your time, our money. But when I joined up, I had 4 chief petty officers, only one graduate from high school. But today, the technology is so much, we changed the standard. And then everybody has health care. Then I used to pause and I say, everybody in the military is a Democrat that just don't know it. No, it's more than that. There's accountability, which I used to say, I'd pause and I'd say that the Republicans used to have in the Eisenhower Republican days, where they balanced the budget, they did things like that. And I think there are some lessons to be drawn, but sir, I do think this training issue is really a social compact this nation must have. Just throwing up tariffs, isn't going to do it. It's training and retraining, and I think, and for a higher skill. And 1/3 of all small businesses say they cannot get the trained workforce. So you're not training them for nothing if that's what they're reporting. You're training them for the next skill that they're looking for.
I used to live in Westchester, and I lived in Wilmington, Delaware, and also lived in Annapolis at one point too. But I was there during the time period when you became a hero for the second time and knocked out Kurt Welding. So
When I what?
you knocked out Kurt Welding.
Yeah.
And that was a big deal for the party. But my question is a little bit different from policy. What is the one life experience that you can point to that really shaped who you are as a person and as a public servant?
I would say the one thing that has most shaped and changed my life and how I look at things, which I think to some degree I was trying to do, but not is the day they rolled my 4-year-old child out of Walter Reed's surgery room. I got married late in life, 47, and she was my first. And the doctor said we couldn't get the brain cancer. I had asked if they could have a pathologist in there to kind of know if it's benign or not. And I turned to him and said, "What's that mean?" And he said, "We think it's glio. She has maybe 3 months, at best 9. I mean, I did what every father did. You walk outside and you say, "Hey, take me." It doesn't work that way. Our health care plan and her courage, we got her out of that hospital because they were great, but she needed to be in a specialist over at Children's, and she was saved. Only 8% of kids survive, no adults, what John McCain and Ted Kennedy had. And that's what delayed me getting in this race again. It came back. But that is where I understood what accountability was. This country gave me a chance with her. I could take her anywhere, and I did. Up to Mass General for proton beam therapy. We got denied care the first time because they said she's not going to survive. We thought we were done for, but the doctor weighed in and said she's different. So that is why I went back to run for, that's what changed, this issue of accountability is what changed me. That now I had to be accountable. I don't say it lightly. Until it happens to you, just don't get it. So I went back and I ran against Kurt Weldon. That was my payback tour. I was an independent. Sometimes I still say as I ran for Senate, I'm an independent who happens to be a Democrat. I think Chuck Schumer thinks that a lot. They put more money in against me, my Senate race, the DSCC, on television ads than they put against Mitch McConnell. Independence is not valued. But in my district, it was. I got reelected in that Kurt Weldon district, second Democrat since Civil War, by 20 points, and I didn't spend 1 penny on a campaign ad. I had $3 million. I didn't have to. And yet my voting record is 100% NAREL, 100% human rights, FNRA. But we learned to disagree well. But I was accountable, and they knew it was to them above party. And today, Anita Hill, boy, you think they'd welcome somebody after the Me Too generation like that? But that's the problem with politicians. They're shooting behind the rabbit too much, I think. Voting for that war and now they're sorry. That hearing, why aren't you leading? So I think that issue of my daughter, there's others, but that more than anything changed me. Yes, sir. I'm sorry, I'll come to you.
Thank you for being here. It's terrific. I've been kind of out of partisan politics for about 10 years. It's great to be back with so many of my friends and a number of veterans that are here in the audience as well. Kind of a bifurcation One is, if I were a America First, I would look at the developments in the Middle East with Great Britain forming a new alliance for protection of Straits of Hormuz, and Australia taking a position as the preeminent power to challenge China in the Pacific. If I were an America Firster, I might say, hey, that's exactly what Trump promised. Now, I know most of the people in this room are deeper thinkers than that. But frankly, in the public policy debate, we're going to be running up against that. Second, in this kind of eternal war footing we've been on for the last 20 years, the personal and familial consequence of depression, PTSD among veterans that's led to the highest unbelievable rate of veteran suicide that we've ever seen. So if you would comment on those two things, I apologize for taking 2 bites of the apple here.
Right.
But you know, how do we get people to think about the consequences of this America First policy? And on the second level, what can we do to increase mental health services through the VA and other sources
Right.
for returning veterans?
Right.
Okay.
So I would say I would applaud the other countries doing more, but I would prefer it was under U.S. NATO leadership. Why? Is because the reason Italy and Japan, Italy and Germany and all those countries, Spain and all those countries were there is because we together enacted Article, I've forgotten which article is of NATO, and said one of our countries has been at war. They would not have come otherwise, except maybe ones by ones, unless their interests were involved. Remember, I talked about our collective interest, but that wouldn't have happened if they had always just been the EU and we went over here. The proof of that is what the president is doing today. Hey, I want you to help me strike Iran. Do you think one of those countries is going to strike it? No. Oh, by the way, Russia, China, hey, I need you to put sanctions back on. America First is when we are the leader of the world for collective good, which is in our interest. That doesn't mean it's not a bit selfish. Yeah, it's our security first, but we can't do it without the others to have. And what I'd say is, and this is tough, really tough, do you really think, and this can't go to the first of sometimes, I got that, but said, if you even think climate change can be handled, go ahead, pass that Green New Deal. I want it. I got it. It won't matter unless all the world does it. The tropics has 8% of people in air conditioning. Over half will be in air conditioning by 2050. They will have more air conditioning created than by 1902 to 2005. And all that electricity that presently isn't there is now going to be in running it. Saudi Arabia uses as much energy to run its air conditioning in 10 years as it exports in oil today.